Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2024. My name is Madonna Yoder, and you're joining hundreds of folders around the world on this 25-day journey into the infinite world of repeating patterns folded from a single sheet of paper. You'll discover many different twists in this challenge, building up to advanced patterns with hybrid hexagon twists. On day 14 of Advent of Tess, we're folding this pattern I designed called Enveloped. It has twists on both sides of the paper. And we're going to be using a 24-fold triangle grid on a hexagon with grid lines parallel to the edges. And if you need details on how to fold this grid, or you want to see the crease pattern for the pattern we'll be folding today, make sure to sign up for email reminders at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start, and I'll label this. So I'll use red to be consistent, label this side A, and when we get to the other side, I'll label it B. And we're going to start with a closed hexagon twist in the center. So the mountain folds are coming straight out to the corner of the paper, and the valley fold is going to be above the mountain on the right-hand side. I'm going to fold both of those. I'm going to make sure I don't quite make it through the center. And then I'll pass that off to my next hand while I fold the next pleat and pass that over, and then the next pleat. And so we're working around making our closed hexagon twist and forming it in this kind of tower. So this is really raised up relative to the level of the table. And I can get all 6 of those pleats in place. Notice this whole area where I have my hands is flat, and then the center part is raised up. I'm going to make that center part smaller and smaller until I just have 2 grid spacings of these fins around the hexagon. And now I'll zoom in so we can see more detail. And actually this is convenient to have the A on there because you'll see how far around it rotates. So I'm holding some of the pleats with my left hand and I'm dimpling the top. So just pressing it a little bit so it's a little concave, and then grabbing around and squeezing slightly in and rotating. So I had a little bit of mess there at the corner that I was able to lift the corner of the hexagon and work out. But you'll notice that A is a full 120 degrees rotated. So this edge was pointing vertically, and now it's all the way over there. And that's going to allow all of my mountain folds to continue straight the whole way until they hit the corner of the hexagon. From here, we're going to continue like we did yesterday with rhombus twists connecting directly to this hexagon. And I'll just start on the pleat that's on my right-hand side. These are going to use tube pleat spacing, so I'll have 1 space between the folded mountain and my new valley fold, and another space to get to my next mountain fold. In this situation, the through line of the rhombus is coming from the central hexagon. So we see that mountain fold continue through on the other side. And if we bring this much up, this is the through line for the mountain. Then when we open our pleat coming from the hexagon, we're going to jump 1 grid spacing further out to find the new mountain fold that's the second of our diagonal mountain folds. And really mountain and valley, because whenever I talk about these folds, they're always in mountain valley pairs or pleats. So once we have, and by the way, this will create a pleat overlap over here because we're leaving the next pleat from the central hexagon folded while we get this rhombus in place. Now that we have the rhombus twist in place, we can go ahead and squash, pressing from the top and spreading out into the corners. And now we're going to rotate the paper so that our tube pleat, and I call it a tube because when you stand it on end, it looks like a tube. So this tube is heading out to the right. We're going to repeat our steps using the pleat going to the hexagon that is the bottom of the tube. So setting up our tube pleat in the next direction around, we're going to have one spacing between this folded mountain and the valley fold, another spacing to the mountain fold. This is going to be one of the diagonal pleats. So the mountain coming from the central hexagon is our through line, and setting up that much of the rhombus, I noticed that for my second diagonal pleat, I don't want to just run it straight through because that would run through an existing twist. So I've got my new mountain fold in here. And what I want to do is take this existing pleat, and notice these two pleats are running together at 120 degrees. And we're going to wrap the top pleat around the bottom plate. So we're erasing the extension of this pleat that's laying on top until we reach the mountain fold of the pleat underneath. And this is going to create an accordion. So these two pleats are stacked right on top of each other. And then we can finish setting up our new rhombus twist and squash. So I'll show that once more at tutorial speed, and then I'll show repeats more at comfortable folding speed. That is comfortable folding speed for me. So our next rhombus, we've set our tube to go out to the right. We're going to bring in our next tube pleat, looking at the next pleat around the hexagon as our reference. And then we're going to lift up, and we're running a new pleat under the previous rhombus. And this is going to let us erase the pleat from the previous rhombus until it hits our new mountain fold, and then that will create an accordion with these two pleats stacked right on top of each other, running under the tip of the rhombus, and we can set up and squash our new rhombus twist. Now, so far, if you've participated in Advent of Tess before, you might be thinking that you know what's coming next, that we're going to be folding a triangle twist in those triangle wraps. But like yesterday, that is not the case. We're actually going to be putting a rhombus twist there. So now moving at a little bit more comfortable folding speed, I'm setting up the tube, opening the pleat and finding my second diagonal, and then wrapping the pleat from the previous rhombus. So it's making an accordion, and squashing my new twist before rotating. And now I want to repeat that, but I have a little bit of extra stuff going on down below. So what I'm going to do is I'll set up that tube pleat, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to open the pleat from my first rhombus, set up that tube, and I may need to go ahead and at a minimum lift up my new mountain in here before I can then refold that pleat from the first rhombus. So that was basically reordering how pleats were going through here. So first the pleat from the hexagon, we had the next pleat coming from this rhombus, but we want the pleat from our new rhombus to go through second instead, and that's going to be parallel to the pleat from the hexagon, so it doesn't make so much sense to say first or second relative to the hexagon. And then we can close the pleat from the first rhombus on top. And then we still need to put in our triangle wrap under our previous rhombus and get all of the pleats for our new rhombus into place, and then squash and smooth it out. So what we're going to see on the sixth rhombus is that we'll need a triangle wrap on both sides. So we've been doing triangle wraps between pairs. So we can see 4 of those as we work our way around, but we have 6 rhombi total, so there will be a triangle wrap between this pair and a triangle wrap between this pair. So to get that triangle wrap, I'm going to need to have my new pleat that would be a tube if we were working on any of these other rhombus twists. But because we're all the way around, it's immediately running into another pleat. So, and for reference, it would be a tube with this pleat coming from the hexagon. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this convergence of pleats and pop the bottom one down so the valley can continue through one more grid spacing. So that'll put it in contact with the valley down below. And like we've been seeing with all our triangle wraps, that is going to send a new valley, three-way intersection of valleys, out to the edge of the paper. And likewise, we're going to have a three-way intersection of mountains, one grid spacing away from that three-way intersection of valleys. If I bring those mountains up, that is going to lock around, but I can't quite lock it yet because I need to open the pleat coming from the hexagon. So with this shut, that really doesn't want to go in place, but with this open, that can freely close. So then we've got our through line, this mountain fold from the hexagon, one diagonal. We need our second diagonal, one space off from the first, and that is going to go into the wrap that we've been seeing on between the rest of the pairs of rhombi. And then we can flip our pleat back out. Now we have this accordion pleat under all of our rhombus twists, and squash. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, there was a previous round of Advent of Tess that included a pattern that started exactly like this and then finished with closed triangle twists. But today, what we're going to do instead, when we flip over to this B side of the paper, is we're going to turn these triangle wraps into open rhombus twists. So we've done some open rhombus twists with nudge on day 11, but we haven't done many of them. So I'm going to show exactly how to set it up. When we're looking at our triangle wrap, the anvil of the open rhombus twist, and actually let me start from, if we were folding a closed rhombus, then the central diamond would be sitting right there on top of the wrap. But since we're folding an open rhombus, and both of these pleats that are not already fixed in place by existing twists need to shift over one grid spacing. So that would be one spacing this way for this one, and one spacing this way for this one. We actually have, instead of the central diamond, we have this larger anvil shape. And let me draw that on so I can put it back and show where it was. So these folds were here, and we're shifting this point one space away from the three-way intersection. We're shifting that in. It's going to be an extension of the valley fold. We're going to have a mountain fold 2 spaces from the mountain on the bottom, and of course the valley on the opposite side. And then in the other direction, we're going to have these 2 mountain folds be 1 space apart. So with the closed rhombus twist that we folded on the other side, we had a through line where the mountains on opposite sides were 0 spaces apart and diagonals where they were 1 space apart. Here with the open rhombus, we're increasing both of those numbers by 1. So we have one direction where those mountains are 1 spacing apart and another direction where they are 2 spaces apart. Now, if I want to fold this cleanly, I can either rely on having folded the grid really accurately and go ahead and squash from here, or I can give myself a little bit more breathing room, remove one of these layers, and have that set up as a closed triangle but not squash it while I squash this open rhombus twist. And that's going to give me the least number of layers sitting under here. And so, I don't know how visible this is, but it's going to give me the least shifting in my valley fold off of the grid line. And that problem of like shifting the many layers, shifting the valley fold off of the grid line is something that will be worse with thicker paper and better with thinner paper. But thinner paper is otherwise hard to deal with and easy to tear, so that's what we're working with here. This sky tone that I'm using, which you can also get at gatheringfolds.com, is 89 grams per square meter, which is kind of in the middle of the range of origami papers. So once I moved that layer out of the way and squashed my twist, I can now close it back on top. And now I have a pleat overlap here. And what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm going to work my way all the way around on this side of the paper, and then we'll flip over to the other side to continue folding. So I am going to have 2 twists per side. that are set up as wraps, one of them as a triangle wrap and the other as a compound wrap for every side of this pattern. So next up, we're going to be folding an open triangle twist, and our target triangle is going to be this guy right here. Now I'm going to mark with arrows where these two pleats are going because we don't have enough room to mark the rest of it. So that means we've got a mountain. We actually have a folded valley under there, and that's part of this twist. So with this mountain going out this way, we're going to have a parallel valley, one grid spacing away, but that valley is not going to just stop at this folded mountain. It's going to interrupt the mountain and keep going until it hits the valley down below. And then what does it do when it hits the valley down below? Well, it turns into a three-way intersection. And that's how we get our triangle wrap. So notice I have the extension that this arrow is showing of this mountain, and that's also going to form a three-way intersection of mountains as it wraps around. So now it's a matter of opening this pleat that was originally there and finding the grid line that matches our third edge of the central triangle, erasing the pleat that was there that extends past this new mountain, and folding both the mountain and the valley. And here our pleat disappears into the wrap kind of immediately. So I'm going to press on both sides of the wrap and then at these two corners to squash my open triangle and spread it out as far as it can go. So now I have one open rhombus, one open triangle, a triangle wrap between them. And as I go around, I'm going to come to the next triangle wrap that was already set up. We saw with the last open rhombus that this is our anvil shape here. So that means that we already have this mountain coming from this way. We're going to have this mountain going out the opposite way. And we're going to have a new mountain fold in here. And that is going to come with a valley fold in there. And just like we've been seeing, that valley fold is not going to stop at the existing mountain. Now, the distinction here is the mountain and the valley, or you could think of it as this mountain and this mountain. It's the same angle. Those are coming together at 60 degrees, not 120 like we saw with the triangle wrap. And so when my mountain drops under, my valley is going to bounce. It's not continuing straight, it's on a different grid line. And when it hits the valley below, it's going to bounce again, heading out straight to the corner of the paper. And likewise, my mountain fold is going to follow the valley and bounce again. And with that in place, so the other thing that's going on here is that the existing pleat coming from the triangle here is swapping mountain and valley for one grid spacing, then swapping back. So we end up with a lot of drawing in here. We end up with our mountain and valley forming this zigzag pair, and our existing pleat swapping mountain valley as it crosses into the zigzag, and then swapping back as it crosses out. And then that can all fold up flat for a compound wrap. And if you feel like you need to practice the compound wrap, then definitely check out some of the earlier days where we're working with hexagon, triangle, then rhombus. Particularly, I'm going to say the second and third of those days, so would be day 10 and 11, where we would set up some of those wraps for the rhombus twists. So then we can set up our final pleat for this open rhombus, making sure that it's 2 spaces away from the other side of the anvil, that the mountain is 2 spaces away rather. And then we can freely squash this rhombus. We don't need to worry about anything with that outer pointy corner because that plate has already been shifted away by folding the open triangle. So in the broader pattern, which by the way I have taught a tutorial on with 48 grid divisions, these twists, the open rhombus and open triangle, would be positions of symmetry. And both of these wraps would end up being folded as closed rhombus twists. But for the purposes of today, we're going to have both of these wraps fold just like the wrap is set up. So the triangle wrap will be folded as a triangle and the compound wrap will be folded as a closed rhombus. And basically these are the steps, if you want to try and work ahead, that we're going to be doing. So now we're repeating, we're folding another triangle next to our rhombus. And I'm going to do the full cues again this time. We've got 1 mountain fold already of our open triangle. We're going to have a second and a third grid direction around this triangle. And as I open the pleat from my latest rhombus, I'm going to pop that down. So I'm going to have this valley fold, 1 spacing from the next mountain fold, and that's going to run straight through this mountain fold and down into the valley parallel to the mountain, which are both in the pleat from the rhombus. And then that's going to wrap around and close. And then we can find the third pleat of our open triangle twist, which will erase the pleat that was headed out towards the corner. And squash. And once more for this rhombus with drawing on there. Since we've seen it already, I'm going to draw in a different order, since we already know, for example, that the valley is going to come straight from this area at the corner of the open triangle. So it's not the same flap of paper that the open triangle is on, but it is hitting right at the corner, and it's going to 1 spacing away. I'm going to have a mountain that's parallel to that valley. And eventually I'm going to have a mountain that is 2 spaces from the mountain feeding into the triangle wrap. And by the way, when I'm looking at things feeding into the triangle wrap, the pleats coming from existing twists take priority, and this third pleat is just kind of there temporarily to make the paper lay flat. So the first thing I'm going to take care of is where I have a pleat crossing this pleat from the previous triangle. And I'm going to pop down where the valley hits the mountain, and also keep the mountain lifted up, and then zigzag both the valley and the mountain, and then close that back up. So now I'm turning this pleat, instead of being here, into that final mountain that I marked over the top of that anvil shape, making sure to put a valley next to it, as always. And I can squash my new open rhombus twist. So now we've seen all the moves on this side at least twice, slowly. I'm going to start showing them with descriptions still, but without drawing. So I'm going to open the pleat from the open rhombus that I just put in, pop the mountain down 1 spacing from the corner, running a valley through. I'll wrap, and this is the standard triangle wrap. And that wrap is happening right at the corner of the rhombus. And then I'll open the original pleat to outline 1 grid triangle and set it down to squash my new open triangle twist. Now I'll take the pleat coming out of this triangle and 1 spacing from the corner. I'm going to pop that down. The valley is coming from this direction, coming from this corner, and it's going to zigzag as it crosses. So it's going to zigzag for the valley, and there's a parallel mountain that will zigzag as well, and those will all fold flat. And then I have this spare pleat from the 3-way intersection that's disappearing as I put in my new pleat with the mountain 2 spaces away from the pleat below. And squash. And repeat. So 1 space out from the fat corner of the rhombus, I'm popping the mountain fold down, running a valley straight from under the corner of the rhombus, putting in a triangle wrap, but it's not going to be particularly happy until I have the 3rd pleat of that open triangle twist. This is erasing the pleat that was going out to the corner. And squash. And now I'm popping down 1 spacing from the corner of the triangle, emphasizing the valley running through here and the mountain 1 grid spacing away. Then effectively what I'm doing is popping up that point. So you can see I have a three-way intersection of mountains up here. That point is my second three-way intersection of mountains. And as I pop up that point, my new valley comes into place, and I can collapse that whole compound wrap. Now this pleat, which is the top of the two pleats that were stacked on top of each other, the accordion, is going away. And we get a pleat in an entirely different direction. So the pleat was in this direction, we're going in this direction. And that mountain is 2 spaces above this mountain below. And squash. And now we have another triangle. So I'm going to pop down 1 space out from the corner of the rhombus. I can either choose to finish setting up the triangle or finish setting up the triangle wrap first. Like, they can happen in either order, but that wrap isn't going to be fully happy closing until the triangle is all the way set up. And then we can squash. And now I want to put my new rhombus twist in. So this is the last rhombus. It's going to be the last triangle under there. Now I'm popping my corner down, making sure that my valley is happy running all the way in, and likewise my mountain beside it. I'm going to pop that point up from the back to form the compound wrap. And as I look at putting in my new pleat, I see it's running into the corner of my existing rhombus twist. And I don't like that. So there are 2 options for how to move forward. Well, really, there's 3 options. Option 1 is go ahead and set up that triangle in the middle too. Option 2 is fold a compound wrap under the tip of this rhombus, which functionally shifts this pleat over 1 spacing and makes it not a problem. Basically makes the problem go away. Or option 3 is pinch this in the air and air fold this rhombus and then come back to this problem later. I'm going to go with option 2 this time. If I was folding just for myself, I'd go with option 1 of go ahead and put in the next open triangle. But for today's purposes, I want to keep the moving parts as minimal as possible. So I'm going to show you, I've got this 1 pleat coming out under here, and that's going to stay folded the whole time. Then I'm going to split. So notice this is staying folded even as it's changing orientation. I'm going to split the mountain fold. So instead of it going straight out that way, it's going to go on the 2 grid lines on either side. And in this direction, it'll go all the way out to the edge. In the other direction, it's just going to go 1 grid spacing, and then it'll split again. This is basically taking that pleat underneath and flipping it over so it can tuck under. So this may look like a new kind of wrap, but it's really the same compound wrap that we've been doing, just with an extra pleat that we're completely ignoring in the middle of it. So we can go ahead and get that compound wrap in place. Again, like I said before, there's also option 3, which is pinch things in here and air fold this rhombus. But with the compound wrap, we can get that rhombus folded nice and secure. And then come back, and the first thing we're going to do here is take out the compound wrap. So here's with the compound wrap, here's without the compound wrap. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have that same valley fold for the triangle that we've been having. We're going to take this mountain coming out of the fat corner of the rhombus and pop it down 1 grid spacing from the corner, letting the valley go to the flap under the corner, under the pointy corner of the rhombus. And what this is going to do is, notice until now I've had this rhombus corner on top right now. You might also have the rhombus corner tucked underneath. What I was going to say is we want this rhombus corner tucked underneath. We want this pleat to be free to move. And I can identify my target grid triangle in the middle of this area. And so I'm going to have that standard triangle wrap going on up above. And I could end up with just a normal pleat overlap down below, or I could do a compound wrap. So with the pleat overlap, I would have the pleat from my rhombus fully folded and then fold through the pleat from my triangle. Perfectly valid. But for the purposes of making sure they're exactly the same as all the other corners, I'm going to open that up and pop that same point up as a 3-way intersection of mountains. Make sure that there's a valley continuing out above that. And that is going to lay down as my my compound wrap. And then I can squash this triangle twist. All 3 of the corners this time are kind of bound up in some structure or another. So there's not many places to press to squash. But that's okay. We can start it gradually and make sure it spreads out into the corners. And so now we've completed that ring that defines enveloped, and we can flip over to the other side, and we're going to take each of these, I'll start with a triangle, each of these triangle wraps and flip the pleat that's free to move and turn that into a closed triangle twist. This is the same idea as in yesterday's pattern, where we had that section that could have been a partial closed rhombus, but we turned it into a closed triangle instead. So this is exactly that same part of the archetypal structure, which I call a tiling. And I'm going to work my way around counterclockwise just because I have more space on this side than I do right here. It's really arbitrary. So with these compound wraps, I have not just the one pleat that's free, but also a second pleat that's going to the edge. I'm going to open up and pop that point. It's always that one point that's at an intersection of 3 valley folds. Pop it up, and that is going to be one side of my central diamond. So that was down here. When we pop it up, we're using all of the same mountain folds that we had originally. We're just putting the valleys on opposite sides of these outer ones. And then we can press to squash the closed rhombus and flip the free pleat on the next triangle. This is going to repeat exactly the same all the way around. Take that next compound wrap, pop the point up, keep the mountain folds, assign the valleys so that it matches a rhombus twist. Flip the triangle. Pop the corner up to set up the closed rhombus. And as usual, if this section is moving too fast, we just saw the slower version of the exact same steps. We don't have any pleat overlaps. We don't have anything getting in the way of anything else. If you wanted to, you could go around and do all the triangles and then go around and do all of the rhombi. Or go around in the opposite order, or whatever your preference is on that. So just like I was mentioning yesterday, there's a lot of different ways to continue this pattern. There's the fully symmetric way, which would have these twists be rhombi instead of triangles. Or you could keep them as triangles and have an extended pattern based on that. Both of these and another option are in the ebook for Advent of Tess this year. So that's enveloped. And it's really cool from either side, especially with backlighting. And actually, I can go ahead and show you the backlighting. So here we've got this swirly structure inside of this ring of kind of hollow shapes. And then on the other side, we've got this rhombus saw-like structure tied over to what in the full repeats would be more of those saw structures. So that's one of the cool things about these tessellation patterns, is not only do you have like the actual pattern that you worked on, but then you also have the backlighting, you have different ways of repeating it, you have like just so many options. And I know that this was a lot of high density work, a lot of wraps. Tomorrow is going to be a little bit more, both high density in the middle and on the outside, and also a lot of wraps. But then after tomorrow, we're going to see a drop in the number of wraps, but an increase in the complexity of the twists used. So tomorrow's will be the last one with all simple twists, or rather simple twists plus open rhombus twists. Those don't quite count as simple. And then we're going to get into the hybrid hexagon twists, which are really exciting and can help make so many more pattern variations. So make sure to post your photos on Instagram or Facebook, tag me at Gathering Folds, use hashtag Advent of Tess or Advent of Tess 24 to help me and other people to find what you've shared, what you've folded. And feel free to ask for help in my Discord server. We've got a very responsive community of folders on there, and this is definitely something where I can kind of anticipate that some people are going to need more help with this one than some of the previous days. So yeah, definitely reach out if you need help. Don't just struggle on your own. And happy folding. I will see you in the next day of Advent of Tess.